I interrupted John Whitecamp to bring in Eric Hudson's perspective on all of this, and I think maybe we should go back to where John was and invite Katie to offer her perspective down the road farther than where we got started. And maybe at some point, because I know there are people on this call, we've heard from a couple who were pre-law members and then opted to get involved in the fraternity at the law school and or alumni level. And I think, as mentioned earlier, we also have some folks that are currently pre-law members. So maybe in no particular order, we can get some input from those folks. And again, I don't expect this to be some kind of a series of lectures. I would hope that it's interactive and that people that have questions along the way can jump in and ask their questions, and hopefully we'll have some answers. So I'll back away and let someone else jump in.
I'd be interested to hear from the current pre-law students, like, why did you guys join? What do you get out of this thing these days? Now that we're old and decrepit and all that.
For yourself, Eric.
I was talking about John.
Brett was just here, and I know that he's the one for University of Illinois Springfield, the other Springfield in the Midwest. And he'll probably find his way back on shortly after we all got kicked off, because I had to go back and find the link.
That was my fault. Sorry.
No, it happens. It happens. I've done the same thing like 3 or 4 times with my own chapter members.
I'm happy to do some talking. Are you guys good?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, if you guys don't know me, I'm Katie Gibbs. I've been working at the executive office for about 8 years. So I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. I went to school for social work, and that transferred me into this job here as a nonprofit. I worked under our pre-law director for a while, and then I worked in the pre-law department. I think I've worked in every position that you can have at the executive office before I landed as the director of membership. I kind of have a new pet project, which is our membership auxiliary. So part of our mission is service to the profession. And this was our way to open up Phi Alpha Delta membership to other people that are in the legal profession, but maybe they aren't in school or they didn't go to law school. They don't have their law degree. So we're up to about 50 members now. We just launched it in May. And I would say about half of those members are what we call our pre-law alumni. So those are our members that joined in pre-law but did not move on to law school. So before, we were really losing touch with these members. So with the auxiliary program, we keep them in Phi Alpha Delta. You guys know the legal profession is changing. People are taking gap years a lot more often. People are getting their master's in legal studies instead of going to law school. So this was really a way to allow membership for those students that or non-students that want to stay active in Phi Alpha Delta. I've got some plans for it moving forward. I really want to get involved with some of the paralegal associations. All of you lawyers, attorneys, you're welcome to invite your paralegals, your legal secretaries. They can join Phi Alpha Delta now. There are a few limitations to their membership, like they don't have local chapters, they're not allowed to vote at convention, those kind of things. But they can definitely benefit from our professional networking and some of our other professional benefits. So with the pre-law program, we have what we call the senior transition program, where we funnel them from the pre-law program to the law program. But now we also have the auxiliary if they're not going to law school. Same kind of thing, they get a discount on their membership if they do end up going to law school. It's a very brand new program. We're still working out the kinks, but it's been very smooth so far. I know when this program was first mentioned, there was worries that there would be people that would join just to get on to our mailing list or to get our contacts, and that is not what I'm seeing. The members that are joining the auxiliary have really diverse backgrounds. There's a lot of federal employees there, a lot of government employees, a lot of people in the military. So I think it's a great way to diversify our membership and serve our profession. If you guys have any ideas for the program, any questions about the program, I would love to work with you guys to put it into place.
Well, I'll tell you an idea that we had that dates all the way back to the beginning. We had some people that came forward, and then others we persuaded to join that, were directly in keeping with this idea that the heart of the pre-law program was to help college students figure out what the hell they want to do with their lives. And that there would be people that would join that would choose not to go into law school. In fact, we had one guy that scored really high on the LSAT and got accepted all over the place and made this kind of gut-wrenching decision. And I forget, he went on and he was involved in insurance or something. I knew for a while, I've lost track of it, but he did really well. But my thought was, if there's a way, once this builds, you've got people that are not attorneys, maybe even not affiliated with any legal profession, another profession, but you may find that it's helpful to have a system of contacts with people who are not attorneys. I mean, we refer business to each other. We tout that as a thing that's important as a part of our P.A.D membership, our friendships, our professional referrals. Why not include that group too? Because if this grows, as you hope it might, I'm sure, we'll probably have people that are involved in a lot of different professions, and that might provide professional assistance in a whole new way that if we do it right, would be effective in helping attorneys, but non-attorneys too. And maybe that's a reason why people will stay involved, is for those contacts. I mean, networking's everything, and with LinkedIn and all the ways that we stay in contact with each other now, there's surely ways to do that fairly easily. So that's the thought.
I know between 2012 and 2018, both I and BJ, we were involved in trying to come up with something, because it essentially started with, like, how does my paralegal, how does my legal assistant somehow become a member of this? And so it kind of, there was a lot of back and forth on the board for probably about 6 years or so. I know BJ was heavily involved in drafting.
Yeah, and one of my goals was always to get some of the paralegals at my office to join, because they were kind enough to put pictures together with me to share on Wednesdays. We wear purple, so I'm going to reward them with membership in the auxiliary. But of course, now we're social distance, so we're going to wait. We're still going to do it, but it'll be a while before we can do those group pictures again.
Well, they can definitely join now, BJ. Send them the invite.
Yeah, I will try to get a whole. It's a lot of remote working and not communicating as regularly with people, so we'll try to get around that and get them joined up.
So it provided, an avenue for these paralegals, legal assistants, legal secretaries, other law-related staff to join, and then sometimes you had a spouse of a Phi Alpha Delta of a P.A.D who was heavily involved and kind of gave them a sense of belonging, Phi Alpha Delta, and then we have somebody like my mother who joined accidentally.
And what is different about this auxiliary program is that your membership dues are annual, and that's very different from all of our other programs.
Katie, do we have an idea of where most of the members are located throughout the U.S. or elsewhere?
I would say right now they're mostly U.S. citizen in the 50 states, whatever.
Is there like a group that's mainly in New York or Chicago or somewhere else that they could actually hold meetings or get-togethers with each other?
They could, but that's really not the purpose of the program. Like they're not supposed to be having like a local affiliation and that kind of thing. But maybe as we all move virtual, maybe that's another way they can connect.
There's also the opportunity for vendors who do want to, who do work for lawyers, to become involved and do sponsorships, not just at our national level, but for our local chapters. So if you had, court reporters, process servers, other kinds of groups that market their services to lawyers, they could certainly, if the local chapters want them to, get involved with the local alumni chapters, sponsor events, and do support for those chapters as well.
I guess I'll jump in a little bit. So I was a pre-law member I became a member in the fall of 2014. And I was a pre-law member through 2017, which is when I transitioned to my law school chapter. It's crazy to me hearing your guys' vision that you guys had so long ago and actually seeing it in practice, because that's exactly what our chapter did. Our chapter, we're a place, if you have any interest in law, come join us. We're going to walk you through law school. We're going to bring in speakers that don't just do law, like lawyers. We had the law librarians come. We had people that were in law enforcement come. So really kind of giving people the path of, do you want to go into law school, or do you want to do something connected to the law? And so that, honestly, as somebody that does not have any legal background or family that was in legal background, because the only attorney in my family was the judge in Georgia that was killed before I had a chance to have any idea I wanted to go to law school, it was a helpful place to actually get information on how do you actually apply. How do you study for the LSAT? How do you know what kind of law you want to go in? And just having those people to talk to made the world of a difference for me and many of my classmates who've gone to, I don't even know how many law chapters, but it was nice because I had contacts at every law school in the country because of P.A.D. And so I got to know how different schools were, how I enjoyed it. If people went to competitions, they would end up running into some of my pre-law classmates at competitions. So it honestly was worthwhile for me to join, because it actually is what led me on the path to be where I am today.
Well, that's really good to hear, because I know that's exactly what we hoped it would become. When we started the program, there was just nothing out there. There was no group of any sort that connected pre-law students anywhere. If you didn't have a really strong program at your college or university, you were at a severe disadvantage. And we had a really good pre-law advisor, but it was really, some of you will remember Dr. Barty pretty well. I had a several month effort to persuade her to switch from this notion of what she thought she had built that was so strong at Southwest Missouri State to agree to become our advisor and back this program that she then became one of the great believers in P.A.D. Went to her grave thinking it was one of the great organizations she had ever joined. And she said that. And it was the kind of thing that once people started to realize that we could connect and network and get information that was useful, this is exactly, what you're talking about is exactly what I think we all hoped and dreamed it would become, at least for the pre-law student. One of the early problems was how do we get services to this program? There was always a financial pinch with regard to the rest of the fraternity. And John, Ron, you guys on the board now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the perennial feeling was that law students paid money and they wanted a return on their dollar. They wanted services for law students. There was always some friction or dynamic between law student funds going to fund other parts of the fraternity, but yet they had to, because that was the main source of money for the fraternity for many years, maybe still is. And how do we then carry this over and provide services enough to justify a membership in this group for a bunch of pre-law people? And the idea was we had to reach a point where, if you're going to persuade somebody to join, that there are things like you just talked about that are worth joining for. So I think that is so cool to hear that that's, your personal story. That's why you joined and where it's led you, because that's what we did. That's why we joined. That's what we were hoping for. And of course, that's why we think most of us working on the program at the beginning, we hoped would be the opportunity offered to everybody who joined.
So I'll just chime in. I am the pre-law president for the American Military University, American Public University chapter.
Wow.
And obviously I'm much older than most students getting ready to go to law school. In fact, my children are the age of most students getting ready to go to law school. So for me, I joined because I always wanted to be an attorney. It was always a goal. I ended up having children instead, so it took a different path. When I was younger, what I knew about becoming an attorney, going to law school, stuff like that, obviously, that's completely changed. And so a lot of joining P.A.D for me was a place to actually learn these things that I wasn't going to learn inside the classroom. It was networking, it was learning from others who have done it. And so that was my biggest reason for joining P.A.D. And I mean, all of you right here are proof that that's what I'm getting from P.A.D. So it's great.
Super cool.
Yeah, American Public University started when I was in the pre-law program, when that was my main focus. And when they began, they were our largest chapter for many years in the pre-law program. They've always been completely online and virtual, which is something that's really unique about them. And I think that that chapter can teach a lot to our other pre-law chapters. They've been a great addition to Phi Alpha Delta.
It has been enjoyable with it being able to be online. I don't have to, you know, run a meetup with everybody in the evenings and stuff like that. But we've definitely faced some challenges, and I think it has more to do with the age group of our members as opposed to the virtual side, because, you know, a lot of our members are military, since, you know, part of our school is military, and most of them have families and jobs on top of school. And so I find that we get a lot of, and Elizabeth heard me say this earlier, a lot of resume members now, where they just join to put it on their resume. They don't actually come to the meetings. I have really been trying to engage people more since I've been president. I'm doing movie nights where I'm like streaming a movie and everybody can come in, trying to do meet and greets. I'm just trying to figure out what everybody wants at this point and get them engaged. But it's definitely been a lot easier being virtual, because I couldn't see myself, you know, constantly running to do the meetings and stuff like that. It would be really hard.
One of the benefits, a few that there are to coronavirus, is that we found this virtual world now, and we're making pretty good use of it. And so we can bring in all kinds of folks to your chapters by Zoom or any other platform you want to use, and provide any kind of information you want. We just need to have some advance notice so we can put, you know, a panel together.
We had been moving toward this online for a while, or like a combined in-person online. It was just taking longer, so I think that, yeah, coronavirus kind of kicked it into high gear and made it happen a lot quicker.
Hi, I'm Ava. I'm in the pre-law chapter at Texas State University. It's really cool to hear y'all talk about the beginnings of it, because you definitely don't know, like, you know, I'm just living in what it is now. So it's cool to think that it wasn't always this. But yeah, I've had a really great experience. I've actually pretty much been born into the Zoom meetings and everything, so that's what I've experienced thus far, but it's been really good. Texas State University doesn't have a pre-law major of any sort, so most people are political science, but it's been so great just to be able to network with the other people, and I feel so much more confident than I did even a couple months ago, just being able to talk to my fellow people who are in the process of studying for the LSAT right now, because I'm going to be beginning that soon. So yeah, y'all did a great job, and it has been incredibly helpful for me and a lot of other people. So thank you.
Cool. That's really cool to hear. Yeah, wow.
Because in a lot of ways, Phi Alpha Delta is, like, on the University of Maryland's campus, it was the only legal organization on campus. Just like Ava was talking about, we don't have a law program. When I was at Maryland, we just got a law and society minor, but there's no pre-law program. Like, there's pre-med. And so Phi Alpha Delta really is that stepping stone for any of the one that wanted pre-law on our campus. And so that's kind of the big benefit for us. It's like, I was a history major, so I got to talk to people that actually want to talk about law, where a lot of my classmates weren't going the same route.
So for those of you in school, and I know we're in a different time now with the pandemic, but how much activity do chapters still involve themselves with as regarding like social programs? At I don't know if she's still on Texas State or at American Military. Do you guys do any socialization?
We just had our first social meeting, and I mean, we've just been trying to think about what we can do to connect people. Really, our social media presence is the most important thing to make people excited about it, but the only meeting that we've had thus far that's really interactive, we just watched a movie through Netflix Party all together, and there's a chat function through there, so it's kind of like you're watching it together, but we're still brainstorming ideas, and hopefully it'll be more social next semester.
Yeah, and I would think right now everybody has to rethink how you do that, because you can't really do parties together. And, you know, our local party canceled 2 different debate watches, you know, as people got sick with COVID. And so, you know, it's everybody's got to think about that. I mean, we found that, I mean, clearly one of the biggest reasons why we had people join, and we had people join for all the reasons that, at least at that time, you might think it was worthwhile, which was part of the fun, because we had so many diverse people with different interests and different reasons they joined. But we made a pretty big effort to integrate with the local law community and the local legal community. And there were a couple of bars that they hung out at, the lawyers hung out at, especially the young lawyers in those days. And so we would try to, like, we had an internship program we set up where we had a kind of a network of a bunch of law firms that people had worked at, or that they would talk to our people about internships. And we kind of knew all the firms in town that would grant internships. And our goal was to make sure that P.A.Ds were the ones who got those internships, not random students from the other college in town or elsewhere. And so as we did that, we found out that the attorneys all met at these you know, happy hours and stuff. So we all started going there. And then once everybody found out that's what we were doing, then there were other people that wanted to join, and that became kind of a rush thing every year. It was like, yeah, we're going to go hang out with the attorneys. And, you know, so I don't know. I just wondered to what extent socialization with other P.A.Ds or other attorneys, law students and so on was part of the experience. But
so
and that varies chapter to chapter. But.
Yeah, so for our chapter, like with COVID, it hasn't really hindered us, because we're so used to being virtual. We have meetings twice a month, and we've just kept on going. So unfortunately, while everyone else is kind of struggling to come into the world of Zoom and stuff like that, that's our normal world. And so it really hasn't affected us. We have done things through virtual strides for charity, and we're able to do that virtually too. Everybody just kind of does it on their own. We kind of get together and we talk about it. We report back to one another. We've had meet and greets. We have played some games at the meet and greets. I try to come up with like a legal topic, and we can meet up and talk about it, even if it's just a question that really has no answer, just to kind of get everybody engaged, because everybody has their own opinion, obviously. And then when RBG died, we did a virtual movie night through Zoom, where I streamed the movie. Obviously, we had the disclaimer about recording, and everybody was able to watch the movie. And so it really hasn't affected us negatively, thankfully. So.
Jenna, I remember being involved in the installation of your chapter, and I think John Whitecamp was on that call. And I remember thinking to myself, it just seems so like such a foreign concept to be facing my computer screen and having people, raise their hand and join. I remember, signing off and thinking, geez, how unfortunate that is that these folks don't get a chance to be in the same room and interact and all that. And yet you now have the template for how the rest of us are conducting business, are socializing, are doing all that stuff. I think it'd be fantastic if you would share with everybody somehow on this call and with the executive office and others as to how you've managed to be so successful as a chapter for so long with this concept. For the rest of us, it's like, well, gee, let's think out of the box and how we can make this work. You guys have already figured it out because it's been years now that you've been a virtual chapter. And so, if you can share that with others and help give them some pointers on how to make this thing successful, that'd be outstanding. And maybe you have with the executive office. I'm just not aware of it. But as I sit here listening, I'm thinking we need to share the wealth here because that's what we're all about. So.
Well, thankfully, we have an amazing advisor, Professor James Barney. He has been here from the beginning. I'm sure everybody probably knows his name by now. He's amazing. He's very involved. And so I would definitely say without him still being involved, it probably would have dwindled down. I think for a lot of it is with our university, we are already online all the time. And so most of the people my age who aren't necessarily tech savvy, we've kind of already gotten that figured out and already have that in mind going to an online university. And so I think that helps because I think you're already in the mindset of online. So, okay, the clubs can be online. But I would say the biggest thing is just keeping people engaged. Even simple stuff like, just a question. Like Halloween, before Halloween, the question was, does a trick-or-treat ban violate the Constitution? Well, of course, that brings about all kinds of ideas. And so everybody's like, well, we want to come and talk about that. And so that was a really engaging conversation. So even just something as simple as that to make people want to go, wait, I want to learn more about that, or I have an opinion that I really, really want to share about that. That has been huge.
And I have to tell you too, I was a participant in 22 law school conventions since the time that I was in law school. And my 23rd was virtual this past August. And I thought, how in the world are we going to have social interaction via computer? I mean, I'm sitting here, in my study in my home, alone. How do I interact? And I know there are people on this call that can say it worked out great. I mean, we jumped into a room and we had a beverage and we talked and we engaged and all that stuff. And it blew my mind that we could make it happen because I had a mindset of an old style, the way we did things. And, maybe now I've been dragged into the 21st century. But I think it's fantastic because the reality is, as some others have already pointed out, we can bring in speakers and experts from throughout the country, indeed throughout the world, to participate with us in a room and learn from the best, sitting right here in our own home. So we really need to pick up on it and take advantage of that. And listen, I'm retired, so you guys have probably been doing this for months, but for me, this is an awakening. So,
yeah, I like the 180, Ron, because I know initially you're like, "There's no way we can't do this."
Right. I didn't know how it was going to happen. It happened.
I will say, from the law student's perspective, it's a bit different. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Franklin. I'm the justice of the Magruder chapter at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Welcome.
So I've been in and out. So I've been like turning my camera on and off so you guys don't see me eat awkwardly on camera. In terms of socializing, it's certainly been easy to get people to come to things that are like the speaker series that we're trying to do that I know a few people have volunteered for, or Practical P.A.D or Trial Team and things like that. Socializing has been really, really hard. Just because everyone's tired of watching our screens every day for class. And if you're not physically sitting next to someone where you can just kind of like, did you hear that guy? Did you hear the gunner say something stupid today? Like, that look that you share with the person sitting next to you. You don't have that. And I've been trying to reach out to a lot of my 1Ls, because this year they don't have the experience of lunchtime sessions where we're happy to feed you. Come and sit and talk with us. They are stuck behind a camera and a screen, and it's hard to get people to come out, because when you do, if you try to pull something like this, half the time the school will punish you. We were told, like, well before the national chapter or the national organization made the decision about doing things online, that we really shouldn't be doing things in person, do everything online. And we learned very quickly it's hard to get people to show up for things online. So we've started, I'm not going to say bribing them, but every time you show up, your name goes in a raffle for one of our gift cards that we went and spent $50 for. So it's because between, like, with everyone's so used to sitting in the library, and now the library is a classroom, which is the most unnerving thing I've ever had to go through. Like my soul aches because I'm speaking in my law library. No. You don't have that opportunity to be up until 2 o'clock in the morning finishing your memo with somebody else, and you're all in the same boat. That's not there. And I'm struggling to get my 1Ls not just to connect with me, but with each other. So I applaud you, Jenna. I don't know how you've been able to pull off doing like a completely online chapter. I am struggling to do anything social with my kids.
It's been hard. I will say my officers are actually the ones who have kind of been MIA lately. The members have been coming, but the officers have been MIA. I'm not really sure why, but I think you just kind of have to find something that everybody likes, find a time that works for at least half of them. Obviously, you're never going to find a time that works for everybody, especially with us. We have members. I have a member who's in Okinawa right now. I'm in Texas. I have members in California. So time zone is a big thing for us. I did add an extra meeting on Sundays to try to help everybody. People didn't want to show. You just got to trial and error. I mean, really, that's going to be the biggest thing is trial and error. Definitely find out stuff like you said, the gift card, swag, everybody wants something free. Everybody wants something free. That gets expensive though. So, make sure you only do a drawing like once a month or something. So especially for us, like we can't fundraise. So that really hinders us. We cannot fundraise. We have a set budget that we have to earn through a points program throughout the year at the school. And so, we do a little drawing, but nothing too major, but still everybody wants something free. So that's great. That helps.
Yeah, even at the alumni level, I'm really involved with the West Suburban Alumni Chapter here in the Chicago area. We've had some real problems getting people to participate in social events online. I think we had a little success rate the first couple of times we started where people clocked in and thought, oh, this is something new. Let's see what they do. But then after a while, it got to be, all right, everyone logged on and sat there and stared at each other. We weren't interacting very well. So we're trying to move now to trying to have more planned activities instead of just a social hour where we rely on people who, like you said, have been looking at their screens all day. Sometimes they're logging into work remotely. They're doing court hearings remotely. Everything's staring at the screen all day long. So there's definitely some screen burnout. So we're trying to figure out ways to do more planned activity kind of things instead of just relying people to look at the screen and still want to talk. So playing games online, contests like the raffle you mentioned, just trying to figure out ways for there to be some kind of hook. So I think like we'll probably do a ugly sweater holiday sweater contest online pretty soon. We'll do after the holidays, maybe we'll do a contest where you show your worst, you share what your worst holiday gift was or something like that. So we're hoping to come up with some ideas that might make people think, oh, that might be interesting. Let's check it out. And we'll see what happens.
We have a couple of chapters that are putting on trivia contest, and they're always looking for new blood. So you may want to take a look at that. Our first happy hour for Alaska statewide was going okay, but then we had a ball of fire from outside of the area come on who just brightened everybody's day and turned the whole thing around. And that's a certain District 8 justice who just has joined our chapter. So you need to sometimes think about just shaking things up a little bit, bringing in some new faces, and sometimes that takes care of it. Everything that Jenna talked about was rather interesting because Ron's right, I did participate in that installation. And when we started putting together Alaska statewide, the first thing I thought about was that installation and how we could make things work. Because we have members just within the state of Alaska that are 1,600 miles apart. So this is a regular part of our lives. So we're adapting quite well and finding different ways to bring pockets of people together and start pushing a little bit of an advertisement on various places within our state to the rest of our members, and that's having a pretty good effect.
John, I'm an old face, but I'd welcome the opportunity to jump in with the Alaska alumni sometime. Speaking of young faces, Tom Benz, I see your face on the screen. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I hope that you have a Jack and Coke somewhere within arm's reach during happy hour on a Friday night.
Sadly, I do not. I'm still doing work here on the East Coast. So that's why I'm not up on the video. I'm typing and responding to emails and entering time.
We're glad to have you with us nevertheless. John mentioned trivia. Should I give the answers to the trivia questions that I started at about 6 o'clock? Who has the answer to this one? Who was the first ever international justice? Nobody?
Oh, you got a bunch of people that know.
What's that? What's that?
You got a bunch of people that know that one.
You probably know it best, brother. The first international justice of Phi Alpha Delta served from 1976 to 1978. And yes, indeed, I told you these things would all relate to the discussion. His name was and is Don Hudson. Who was the first pre-law director employed by P.A.D.? Now, of course, the operative word there is employed, as in compensated. Anybody know who that was? Jay's going, yeah. That was you, Ron.
Yeah.
That was you, Ron. Yeah, I got paid, by the way, to be pre-law director and executive secretary. I was paid the princely sum of $15,000 per year, so I certainly wasn't doing it for the money. When and where was the
worth every cent,
convention? What's that?
Worth every cent.
Yes, thank you. Change back from your dollar. When and where was the convention that approved the pre-law program? That was my next question. BJ, you know that one, don't you?
Yeah, he knows.
I'm a little more focused on earlier history today, so I'm
okay.
saving
I shouldn't ask you because I know you've got a full plate of historical significance to bring to us at some point during the weekend, so I shouldn't do that. Of course, the convention where the pre-law program was approved was in Hot Springs, Arkansas in August of 1980, where many of us, by the way, got to meet the governor at the governor's mansion in Little Rock. We took a little bus tour. Eric, you might remember. Yeah, in buses that, by the way, weren't air conditioned, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah, we remember that. It was the governor and the governor's wife.
Well, I was going to get to that. A woman who, at that time, went by the name of Hillary Rodham, became an honorary member of Phi Alpha Delta right there in the governor's mansion with all of us standing around watching. And little did I know and suspect, think about this, I'm a law student in 1980 in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Little did I know or suspect that same Hillary Rodham would become the junior senator of my state of New York 20 years later, but indeed she did.
By the way, Ron, this was the book that was given to your committee, and I believe every delegate at that convention in 1980, the pre-law project description, which doesn't really have a full history like John gave, but it described a lot of the things that we were trying to explain or persuade delegates to the convention that this was a program worth undertaking. Wasn't it your committee? You were on that committee, right? or chaired the
pre-law
committee.
committee in 82 or what?
No, the Constitution and Bylaws Committee.
In 80.
Yes.
In 80, when it started, but I'm not sure if I was on, actually, I wasn't on any committee other than the resource, because in 1982 in St. Louis, I was employed. So I wasn't actually assigned.
Yeah,
to
that's
a
true.
but I was
I
resource.
can't remember. I know I was a resource person to the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, and there was like an informal group. It wasn't an official convention committee of pre-law people. We talked about ideas, and then that was, some of those ideas were, I think part of that was what became some of the basis of the resolutions that were used by the Constitution and Bylaws Committee when they then adopted the program. But yeah. That was in 80.
Yeah. Yeah, Hog Wild PADs. That was
Hog Wild
1980. And help. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Whitecap, but didn't you meet the future Mrs. Whitecap at the 1980 convention?
2 years later.
Was it St. Louis?
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Let's see. What was my next question? So the first pre-law chapter, again, I told you we'd find answers to these things. The first pre-law chapter was indeed Southwest Missouri State University, now Missouri State University. And what is their mascot? That's right, the Bears. Am I right, Eric? Eric's answering the phone. And by the way, I should tell you that I spoke to Eric yesterday for a while in preparation for this, and he then dropped everything and started finding all the stuff like he just showed you, booklets and reports and all kinds of things. So thank you to him for diving in. Who was the first pre-law member? Well, that was indeed first pre-law member ever. And how many pre-law chapters do we have now? I know it's over 350, but I'm not sure what the number is. And it shows you how we've expanded greatly. Eric made mention of this early on about how the pre-law program could overtake, quote unquote, the law program. I mean, we're limited in the law program by the number of law schools there are. My goodness, there are, I don't know, 1,000 colleges and universities out there. And we've obviously done very well in infiltrating most of them. So that's it for trivia.
So did Katie give us an answer to the last question? How many current pre-laws there are?
I am out of the pre-law department now, so I don't know the exact number, but I will tell you that pre-law has way more members than the law at this point. The pre-law program is our bread and butter now.
Yeah, I can tell you there's several more pre-law chapters in. There's slightly over 200 law school chapters. Of pre-law is closer to 300.
It's well over 300. It's probably closer to 380 by this point.
I got to go back and look at the.
Yeah.
I know it's something with the most recent number.
Right.
380 was going to be my guess.
Yeah, it wasn't 400.
No, not quite. We're not quite there yet.
I just remember having the floor discussions as to whether or not it's going to be a drain on the fraternity as a whole, and being a minority advocate saying, no, it's going to be a cash cow. I do remember having those discussions in committees as well as on the floor of the convention. So it did go way into the early 80s, that type of discussion.
That's right. Yeah, there was a real fear that not only would it overtake the program, but it would drain resources, and there was a feeling that if we didn't serve the undergrads, then they would get mad and riot, and we'd have problems. And there were a lot of things that people thought about that you get a bunch of law students and lawyers together, they're going to think of every conceivable problem, issue. But the main thing is we kept on track with the central goals. And that's one of the great things about it in terms of service is, P.A.D. could bring more benefits to more people through the undergrad program than anything else we were undertaking, which, rubbed some people the wrong way, because by God, we're a law school organization, not anything else. We're for lawyers and law students. And who are these dumb people we used to be running around. We're not going to do anything for that. But that was, it was a old-fashioned kind of attitude, or institutional attitude. But fortunately, most people saw the benefits, and they cut both ways, and they still do, clearly. So that's awesome.
The concern was change in focus, and we were able to avoid that. We compartmentalized pre-law so that was not really affecting us. The only way that pre-law came back to bite us in the short term was that at that time, Phi Delta Phi was still a law fraternity, and you could only join one law fraternity under the Pan-Hellenic rules. And they were always looking for ways to undercut us and take students that otherwise would become P.A.Ds. And so about 3-4 years after pre-law got underway, they had a big thing on the front page of their website that basically said we were no longer a professional law fraternity because we had undergraduate students. The funny thing is that now that they have given up being a fraternity and they're a society, they now have a pre-law program that we're not supposed to know about that has 31 chapters.
One of the worries was the idea that law students would abandon their own chapters and do too much to help the undergrads, forming chapters and so on. And here, just as an example, January 16, 1985, this was a pre-law advisory council memo to the International Executive Board. International Vice Justice Jack Miller, quote, "I have also recommended that the pre-law chapter contact other pre-law chapters in the state or area and work with them on various projects. At every district conference I've attended, there has been a great deal of excitement about the pre-law project, and I have been very cautious with these students and have told them that while I think their chapter might be able to handle the project, I've discouraged them from individually taking on the role of forming pre-law chapters, which many want to do. I am very concerned that individual law school members will desert their law school chapter and do nothing but work with the pre-law chapters, which would not be good for either." So if you can believe that, that was a major concern in 1985, that the law students would abandon their law school chapters and just work on pre-law. So too much service to the student in the community. Anyway, it's funny how things turn out, but I think the people that you're talking to here, most of them foresaw something like what's happened, that the program would grow and that there would be lots of people who would interact and get something out of it, like everybody seems to now. All right, that's enough history lessons, I'm sure.
Well, not quite.
Never enough.
Happy anniversary. This is the 40th anniversary of the pre-law program.
Maybe from at least 1985 and Jack Miller, huh? Yeah, it's too bad Jack's not with us. He was, we haven't really mentioned him, but Jack was heavily involved with this program too. Jack was a past international justice. He and my dad were partners. Jack was from Lebanon, Missouri, just a country kid who wound up going to law school and became the local, kind of an old county prosecutor and country lawyer. Very well thought of international justice of P.A.D. And Jack tremendously helped with this program, and we loved him as law students. My God, we organized a trip to Lebanon, Missouri, which is 45 minutes outside Springfield in the country, by the way, where I live now. And it was so we could go to his A-frame house and hang out and have a barbecue with he and his wife. And I mean, we thought that was the coolest thing ever. So Jack deserves some credit as well. Since he's not here to contribute, I thought I'd mention his name.
That's good of you to do, Eric. And actually, that was part of one of my trivia questions. I said, where was the first pre-law chapter? And I said, for extra credit, who installed it? And of course, that was Jack Miller. And that was in April of 1981. Jack was a cool guy to the extent that he was the high school quarterback Jackie Lee Miller, who married the cheerleader, and took up residence in a trailer park, I think, while he went to law school. And by the time it was over for him, and as you said, over much too soon. I was with you and your wife in Lebanon for his funeral 5 years ago, and it's incredible, folks, that the guy who started out as a country lawyer and the high school quarterback, and speaking at his funeral was Missouri United States Senator Roy Blunt and correct me on this, Eric, but former governor and former U.S. attorney John Ashcroft also spoke. In fact, he sang at the funeral service, and each speaker was better than the next, and there they were to pay tribute to their good friend Jack Miller. So it was a sight to behold, and I'm certainly grateful that I had the opportunity to be there to witness that, because it was something else. And Jack Miller, he took over for the fraternity at a difficult time. Well, first of all, to go back to 1974, and the guy got elected to the board as a student, and then found out after he got elected what the heck he was in for with trying to make it to meetings and all that stuff, because back in the day it was travel every 6 months to a meeting somewhere. But then he became international vice justice after struggling really the first few years to stay on the board. In 1984 he's vice justice, and little does he suspect that in 1985 the international justice is going to be shot dead, and he had this shoulder the responsibility of taking on the fraternity and serving as acting IJ before being elected to his own 2-year term in 1986. But there's a guy who finally was rewarded with admission into the Distinguished Service Chapter before he passed, and then of course he developed cancer and was deathly ill, but still made it to the convention I chaired in 2014, and we were so happy to have him there with us. And then, of course, a year later, learned the terrible news that it was taken from us. But there's a guy who was an icon in Phi Alpha Delta, and I'm glad you brought him up, and then we're able to talk just a couple of minutes about him. I don't know if anybody else has a story about Jackie Lee, but now would be the time to tell him.
Well, I want to go back to the transition from Stan Cohn for a minute, because that transition could have been a real mess, and Jack dropped everything and made the transition about as seamless as you could, and just took over, and it was amazing. We lost hardly a step. We helped the Cohn family. In fact, a number of us continued to help them when the murderer was up for parole and that type of thing. But he just did a masterful job, and that in and of itself should have been enough for a Distinguished Service Chapter induction, but he did so much more on so many different levels. But about 4 years out from 1974, we got to be pretty good friends and stuff, and we were having a drink after a session, and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "Why didn't you tell me what I was getting involved in? If I had any idea what I was doing in 74, I would have run away so fast."
Well, the reason, you may remember, the reason he got selected to run for the board, this was in an era, for those who don't know what happened, the 1960s were a little bit turbulent in colleges especially, and that turbulence seemed to hit the law schools and arrived at the P.A.D convention in 74. And Jack was one of the few first-year law students who had come. I mean, most of the delegates to the convention usually were second and third year students. Jack was the only guy that the Benton chapter UMKC Kansas City could find, and so he had kind of just said, "Okay, I'll go along for the ride." It was Toronto, wasn't it? 74. Yep. Yeah. So Jack was with a group, and they said, "Well, we got to have somebody that if we're gonna, get these old fogies out and learn, have somebody that represents the students, by God." And there'd always been this rumbling about it, we'll elect a student to the board and so on. But we got to have somebody that will be able to be there more than one term and not be, an alum and in the legal profession already. We want a student that'll come back to the next convention, and he would fit the bill. So he got selected. So my dad took him under his wing. He was in law school right in Kansas City where my dad practiced at the time. And, that's how they got to be good friends. And John, we'd be remiss without saying there was another transition period when your dad got sick, and at a very young age, you were tasked with taking over the entire operation from the executive office standpoint, and became what was your title, interim or
I was
temporary
interim on 2 occasions.
I'm sorry,
I was the interim executive director on 2 occasions.
interim executive director for how long?
First time for about 14 months, second time for 8 months.
Well, that first time especially, I think, was one that there was some feeling that the fraternity might not make it through that period, but for your stewardship. At least that's the story I was always told. So both at the time and later. So
there's a lot of stories. Some are truer than others, but
that one's one of the truer ones for sure.
Let's go back to '74 for a second. There was another piece that fell into place that helped Jack get elected. There actually were 3 law students who wanted to run, and they finally got together. They pulled straws to determine which of the 3 was going to run.
Wow.
And the nominating committee, traditional nominating committee, met, and by 7 o'clock that night, they'd only named the top 3 spots on the board. And so they came out of committee, because we had a contract and had to be out of the convention room, came out with just the top 3 spaces with recommendations, and everybody else ran from the floor. And that was one of the reasons that Jack got elected as well. Very interesting times.
Very interesting. And you think about how things happen and come together. I mean, how different would the fraternity's history have been if Jack Miller were not elected that year? Like Ron says, or like you said, I mean, Ron said he contributed so much, and his connection with my dad, all of those things. And then when Stan was murdered, those are strange things to have happen to an organization. And
the death of Stan Cohn is the one that I revisit on a regular basis, because he was taking us in the same direction, but in a completely different manner. His approach was different, and he really helped to weld a lot of people together. And in the time that he served as international justice, we made a lot of good strides. But he was always good at looking at the other side of the picture, and at the halfway through meeting, he talked about all the good things we did, and then he talked about the reverse side. We had brought in all these members and just done a traditional job, but then he talked about all the other law students that we didn't bring in, and he took a positive and turned it into a negative, and left 2 of us having to deal with a session with the district justices, which was kind of interesting. But he was very good at making you look at the whole picture, and that really helped us a great deal. It would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if he had survived the rest of his term.
Well, that was a time that the pre-law program, it was established, but it wasn't. There was not. It was not a guarantee that the program would survive or continue, and there was still a feeling by some that was not part of our mission, and P.A.D. should not be involved with undergrad students. And there was talk at one point about spinning off the undergrad program and letting it become its own organization. A lot of things that have happened over the years structurally within the fight. There have been people who had to fight to keep this program alive, and all the people that it's helped have benefited from those, I think, intelligent and worthwhile, decisions and efforts. I mean, you just think about the thousands of people that have drawn something from the program, whether it's people who are employed by the fraternity like we were. I was a international field rep, or made choices about law schools or whether to get into law at all. And yet, sometimes people don't see what they don't have the foresight to see what a thing can be and where it might go. So, when you talk about the new program, and is she still on with us?
I am.
Katie? Okay,
I'm
I'm sorry. I'm using Christine, my wife's iPad, and I forget I have to flip things over. But, you were thinking about this program that you've started, and I could see that going in amazing directions. And 10 or 15 years from now being, an extraordinary program that doesn't exist anywhere else in the, in the legal world or non-legal world for that matter. But, it's through the efforts of people like people on this call that these things happen.
And you can think about the other things, Eric, that happened along the way. You're talking about the mid 80s and struggling for existence. And then I think around that time, the Pre-Law Advisory Council came into play, and we had a board member assigned to serve on that council with advisors from undergraduate chapters and from other people that had an interest in the pre-law program, including a student and some district justices. And then we got to the point where pre-law was able to hold its own conference. And I think right around 1990, around that time, there were pre-law conferences being held at different places around the country. When I was elected to the board for the first time in 1994, Rick Pearson, IJ at the time, assigned me to the Pre-Law Advisory Council. So my first order of business was to go that fall to the pre-law conference in Chicago, and I continued going to those things. The next year was Houston. The next year after that was DC. And along the way, I met some students that were active at their colleges and universities in mock trial, and we started talking about, well, can we add that as a component to this program in addition to just having a conference where students will have an opportunity to come together, interact, exchange ideas, exchange programs, learn about LSAT, learn about getting into law school, have some law school admissions people come to our conference, talk to them about admissions process and what they needed to look out for, have law schools bring their representatives and set up a forum and out in the hallway where during a break they could come out, meet with people from various law schools. I mean, it really kept building on itself. And we got to the point where one of those undergraduate students, Jill Trumbull Harris, who was active in mock trial out in Arizona, said, why don't we bring this thing and make it a national program? She drafted a handbook. I know John Whitecamp was involved in helping with the licensing and getting that done. And by sometime in the late 90s, we started a mock trial tournament at the pre-law conference, which is an annual event, not biennial like our law school conventions. And that actually preceded our law school mock trial tournament, which, as you recall, didn't start until, well, I know it was in District 5 in Las Vegas. I know, Tom Benz, you went to a couple of those and kept Las Vegas up at night. But that was sometime, I don't know, 2010 or something, whatever it might have been. And then that became a national program, and the executive office took over. So each in its own way, each of those programs helped build the other until we kept adding components and making the organization and the respective programs have these tremendous benefits.